David man or myth? That's the question Israeli archaeologists are answering. They believe they have uncovered the remains of a palace of King David.
For over 3,000 years, the palace of King David has been one of history's greatest mysteries. Explorers, archaeologists, and scientists searched deep beneath Jerusalem, chasing clues hidden in stone and soil.
It turned out that we have a big city here which was heavily fortified. Some of the stone here are up to 8 tons. This is not a small village, this is a real important stronghold. So our conclusion is that this city is from the time of King David.
Now, the mystery has finally begun to crack, and what they discovered is not just surprising, it is shocking. These finds are rewriting what we thought we knew about the city, its rulers, and the very foundations of history itself. The first hunts for David's lost city. The story of the Palace of David begins with the reign of King David himself, one of the most famous figures in biblical history. Around the 10th century BCE, David was said to have ruled over a united kingdom and chosen Jerusalem as his capital. The Bible describes him building a palace and establishing the city as the heart of Israel's spiritual and political life. For centuries, however, the actual location of his palace remained a mystery. Was it hidden under the stones of old Jerusalem, or was it only a story told in scripture? In the 19th century, explorers set out to find the truth. The first major attempt came between 1867 and 1870, when Captain Charles Warren arrived in Jerusalem on behalf of the Palestine Exploration Fund. He focused his work on the southeastern ridge of the city, an area that later came to be known as the City of David. Warren dug deep shafts and tunnels, carefully mapping underground passages and massive stone walls. His discoveries included water systems connected to the Gihon Spring, which he believed could explain how the city had survived under siege. Although Warren did not find David's palace, his maps gave later archaeologists a valuable foundation to build upon. In the decades that followed, other explorers continued where Warren left off. During the late 1800s and early 1900s, teams such as Bliss and Dickey, Raymond Weil, and Parker and Vincent expanded the search. They explored the Ophel area near the Temple Mount and uncovered more details of the Gihon Spring system. These findings revealed impressive rock-cut tunnels, walls, and defensive structures. Such features suggested that ancient Jerusalem had been carefully fortified, possibly to protect a royal quarter. By the 1920s, interest in Jerusalem's early past had grown even stronger. Between 1923 and 1925, archaeologist R.A.S. McAllister carried out detailed excavations. He focused on documenting the layers of the site, carefully recording pottery, structures, and soil levels. This attention to stratigraphy gave scholars their first clearer timeline of the City of David and helped frame later debates about when the Iron Age structures had been built. Together, the work of Warren, the early explorers, and McAllister laid the groundwork for all later discoveries. They proved that the southeastern ridge held secrets buried for thousands of years. Their maps and notes pointed to a high, defensible ridge that could have once supported a palace worthy of a king. Those first hunts solved some puzzles, but left even bigger questions unanswered. Let's tell you who would take the next step, and could modern science finally uncover the truth about David's palace? Science redraws Jerusalem's past. After the first wave of explorers left their maps and notes, a new era of archaeology began in Jerusalem. This time, the focus was not only on digging, but also on using science to understand the city's past with greater accuracy. The methods became more careful, the records more detailed, and the conclusions more reliable. This scientific turn would reshape everything scholars thought they knew about the City of David. From 1961 to 1967, Kathleen Kenyon led a series of excavations at the Ophel and in the City of David. Unlike many before her, Kenyon was determined to dig with strict attention to layers, or stratigraphy. She carefully recorded each level of soil, pottery, and stone as it appeared. By doing this, she was able to create a more secure timeline of how the city developed through different ages. One of her most famous corrections involved Warren's shaft, a feature discovered almost a century earlier. Warren believed it was a tunnel used by David's soldiers to enter the city, but Kenyon showed it was actually a natural fissure shaped by water. This finding changed how scholars thought about Jerusalem's defenses and reminded everyone that old guesses had to be tested with science. Kenyon's work set a new standard, and later archaeologists followed her lead. Between 1978 and 1985, Yigal Shiloh carried out a decade of work in the same area. His excavations expanded knowledge of the Ophel and refined the study of pottery sequences. By examining layers of broken pottery, Shiloh and his team could identify specific periods in Jerusalem's history, especially the Iron Age. Pottery became a powerful dating tool, since styles changed over time and could be compared across different sites. In the 1990s and 2000s, Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukron continued this tradition of careful science. They focused on the city's ancient water systems, including the Pool of Siloam and other features connected to the Gihon Spring. Their discoveries showed how vital water management was for Jerusalem's survival and revealed more about the engineering skills of the city's builders. These Iron Age features also provided important context for later debates about whether a royal palace once stood above them. With these refined tools in hand, the stage was set for a new excavator to arrive. Her work would not only capture headlines, but also stir one of the most heated debates in biblical archaeology: Eilat Mazar's big claim. By the early 2000s, careful work on pottery, stratigraphy, and water systems had given scholars better tools than ever before. Yet, one big question still remained unanswered. Where was the palace of King David, and could it even be found? In 2005, a new name rose to the center of this debate: Eilat Mazar. Between 2005 and 2007, Mazar opened trenches at the northern summit of the city of David. This high point was strategically placed above the slopes and near the Temple Mount, making it a natural spot for a royal compound. As her team dug deeper, they uncovered something remarkable: massive stone walls and large rooms unlike anything else found in the area. The scale and quality of these remains convinced her that this was not just another building, but something far more significant. She grouped the remains together and called them the large stone structure. Soon after, she made a bold announcement. These ruins, she suggested, could be none other than the palace of King David himself. The finds within and around the large stone structure strengthened her case. Among them were very large foundation walls built with fine ashlar stones, a proto-Aeolic capital fragment often linked to royal architecture, and imported pottery that suggested wealth and far-reaching trade. Even more intriguing were ivory inlays and several seal impressions known as bullae. Some of these seals carried names of officials mentioned in biblical texts, connecting the discoveries to stories of ancient administration and governance. To Mazar, all of this pointed to a building that had served as the center of power. The key question, however, was dating. Using pottery typology and radiocarbon analysis, Mazar argued that the main construction of the large stone structure took place in the 10th century BCE. This was the very era traditionally linked to the reign of David and his son Solomon. If her dating was correct, it would mean that for the first time, archaeologists had a physical candidate for David's palace. Mazar's claim quickly captured attention far beyond academic circles. Newspapers and television channels covered the story, sparking excitement among those eager to see archaeology confirm biblical accounts. For many, her work was the closest anyone had ever come to tying real stones to the story of David's reign. But archaeology is rarely settled so easily. While some supported her interpretation, others raised sharp questions. Could the dating be trusted, and was it really one building? The claim made headlines, but rival scholars were already preparing their challenges. The backlash, and scholars challenge the palace theory. Eilat Mazar's announcement that she had uncovered the palace of King David created excitement around the world. For some, the discovery was seen as proof that the Bible's account of Jerusalem's golden age could be trusted. Yet in archaeology, bold claims rarely go unchallenged. Almost as soon as her reports were published, a wave of criticism followed. Leading scholars stepped in to question not only her interpretation, but also the very foundation of her argument. One of the strongest voices came from Israel Finkelstein, a highly influential archaeologist. He argued that what Mazar had grouped together as the large stone structure might not be a single building at all. Instead, he suggested that the walls and rooms could belong to different periods and had been mistakenly combined into one grand complex. According to him, the evidence did not prove that these ruins were David's palace, and it was risky to tie them so directly to biblical texts. Other scholars offered more cautious responses. Avraham Faust, for example, acknowledged that parts of the structure may indeed date back to an early period. However, he stressed that the evidence was not clear enough to confirm a royal palace. Several detailed re-examinations of Mazar's work were published in the years that followed, many of them highlighting the same point. The discoveries were important, but their meaning was far from settled. Much of the debate focused on technical questions that might seem small but were actually crucial. One issue was stratigraphic sealing. Were the layers of soil and pottery that Mazar relied on truly undisturbed, or had later activity mixed them up? Another concern was pottery dating. While pottery sequences are useful tools, they often cover broad time ranges, which means a structure might not be as precisely dated as it first appears. Finally, some argued that large stone walls do not automatically indicate a 10th century royal palace. Monumental architecture could also have been built in later centuries for other purposes. This back-and-forth debate mattered greatly. It forced archaeologists to sharpen their methods, to collect more reliable samples, and to look for multiple lines of evidence rather than depending on one excavation's results. The controversy also reminded the public that archaeology is a science of interpretation, where different experts can reach very different conclusions from the same set of stones. The palace claim was now on trial in the court of scholarship. If Mazar's building was uncertain, could new excavations elsewhere in the city of David uncover independent evidence for a royal quarter that might finally settle the question? Secrets beneath the city of David. In 2007, one of the largest modern excavations in Jerusalem began at a site known as the Givati parking lot. At first glance, the location seemed ordinary, just a patch of land used for cars near the old city walls. Yet beneath it lay layer upon layer of history, stretching from the Middle Bronze Age through the Iron Age and into later periods. Over time, the dig revealed a treasure chest of discoveries that added fresh depth to the story of ancient Jerusalem. For more than a decade, teams working at Givati carefully peeled back the earth, exposing structures, pottery, coins, and artifacts that testified to the city's long and complex life. Each season uncovered new details that helped scholars trace how Jerusalem evolved. What made this excavation stand out was its scale. It was not a narrow trench or a single shaft, but a broad window into the city's past, one of the most ambitious projects ever carried out in this historic heartland. The most dramatic breakthrough came much later, in 2023 and 2024. Archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority and Tel Aviv University announced that they had uncovered a massive man-made moat or defensive channel. Carved into the landscape, this moat was deep and wide, designed to separate the Acropolis, where the palace and royal compound likely stood, from the lower parts of the city. It was not a small feature but a monumental work, the kind that required careful planning and enormous effort. Its presence confirmed that ancient Jerusalem was not just a collection of houses and shrines, but a fortified capital with a clear division between rulers and common people. The Givati dig did not stop with the moat. Excavators also found high-status items that revealed the city's elite lifestyle over centuries. Among the most striking discoveries were gold rings and luxury objects from the Hellenistic and Second Temple periods. These delicate pieces survived in remarkable condition, showing that the area had long been associated with wealth and prestige. They reminded scholars that the city of David had remained a center of power and influence for generations, not just during the biblical era. The moat's discovery gave independent support to the idea of a royal acropolis. It showed that the city had a physically separated elite zone, matching the logic behind a palace complex. Yet one question remained. Monumental fortifications and palatial structures make a strong case, but can modern dating and laboratory techniques confirm exactly when these features were built? Dating the Palace of Kings. Once the excitement of monumental discoveries is set aside, the real test comes in the laboratory. For decades, archaeologists have debated whether the large walls and fortifications in the city of David truly belong to the time of King David in the 10th century BCE. This argument is not settled in the soil, but in the fine details of dating. Radiocarbon methods and careful selection of samples have become central to the discussion. Supporters of an early date point to samples that were securely taken from beneath foundations, along with pottery that fits the early Iron Age. They argue these finds show the structures were built in David's era. Critics respond that the contexts are often mixed, with materials from later periods slipping into earlier layers. They warn that even small intrusions can change the entire picture. This technical debate may sound dry, but it is at the heart of the matter. If the walls truly belong to the 10th century, then they provide rare physical evidence for a kingdom led by David. If they are later, the biblical account looks more like legend layered onto history. The dating question decides which way the evidence leans. Alongside radiocarbon testing, other clues have emerged. Tiny clay seals, known as bullae, and inscriptions found in the city of David provide an administrative context. Some carry names that match officials mentioned in biblical texts. These do not prove that a specific building was David's palace, but they do show that the area was once a hub of centralized administration. The presence of officials' names adds weight to the idea of a governing court, even if the exact location of the palace remains debated. Modern science goes further with geoarchaeology and microstratigraphic sampling. By analyzing soil layers at a microscopic level, experts can trace how people reshaped the ridge over time. The recent discovery of the moat is also mapped and studied in this way, showing when such massive cuts were made into the landscape. Together, these techniques offer a fuller picture. Instead of relying only on texts or artifacts, they connect layers, landscapes, and laboratory data. Science has indeed narrowed the questions, but after decades of excavation, uncertainty remains. The next challenge is weighing all the evidence carefully. So, what is the cautious, evidence-based verdict? What we truly know about David's palace? After more than a century of digging in the city of David, archaeologists have built a clearer picture of what once stood on the ridge. Piece by piece, finds from different excavations connect into a larger story. Monumental stone walls have been uncovered again and again, showing that large-scale construction did take place here in the Iron Age. On the slope below, the famous stepped stone structure acts as a massive support system, stabilizing the ridge and pointing to an important building above. Together, these features suggest that something monumental and central once stood here. Archaeologists also uncovered evidence of administration and elite life. Seal impressions, or bullae, show that officials were working in the area. Imported pottery and fragments of ivory inlay point to luxury goods. The the kind expected in a royal or governing centre. More recently, the discovery of a wide defensive moat gave weight to the idea that the top of the ridge was separated as an acropolis, a space reserved for the ruling elite. All of these finds strengthen the picture of a sustained centre of power in Jerusalem during the Iron Age. But what remains uncertain is just as important as what has been found. Scholars are still divided over whether the large stone structure uncovered by Eilat Mazar is truly David's palace from the 10th century BCE. Some walls might belong to different periods that were later joined together. Dating remains a challenge, with debates over pottery typology, radiocarbon results, and the possibility of mixed layers. Even with impressive discoveries, there is still no direct proof linking the building to King David himself. The debate also extends to the scale of David's kingdom. Some scholars argue the evidence points to a united, centralized monarchy, while others see it as a more modest, local polity that only later grew in importance. The Bible names David as king of a united Israel, but archaeology must work carefully to match material remains with ancient texts. Still, the discoveries are shocking for what they reveal about Jerusalem's early history. The moat, the monumental foundations, and the elite artifacts show that this city was being shaped by large planned works much earlier and on a bigger scale than many once thought. This is no longer just a matter of faith or tradition, it is now a debate with real, testable data. Excavations continue, dating methods improve, and each season promises more. The next find could be the piece of evidence that finally settles the question. What do you think? Was this truly King David's palace, or just another powerful building of its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below.